Welcome to the Leadership Journal with your hosts, Nick Helgett and Robbie Woodard,
where we cover our journey, struggles, and obstacles that we have overcome, and moments in our careers that have led to growth. Here on Table Talk each week, where we break down various topics and journals of our trials and tribulations.
Welcome to the Leadership Journal. Today we're going to do a side project, side quest, if you may, for all you D&D fans out there. We're going to talk about something a little different today, and it does translate eventually into leadership. But I've been studying the idea of codependency, and it has brought to light a lot of things in my life that I wouldn't mind sharing. And this is a new one for me because I generally don't share these kinds of things. So it's going to be different. This episode's going to be a little different.
We're going to see the emotional side of Nick with this one a little bit more.
Maybe.
I mean, for the viewers, it's more of a hearing the emotional side, not really seeing it.
How you develop from an early age into adulthood, those learned behaviors, they translate into your day-to-day. And for me, in my journey, they translate into my leadership style a lot more than I realized. And it's an interesting concept and how it ties in. So as I've learned how to be an effective leader the last couple years, I've noticed that I am very dependent on those around me. And where I work, we use a term called leveraging comparative advantage to better the team, and that's what I thought I was doing. And the more I learn about codependency, the more some of my insecurities as a leader, as a person, needing somebody there to feel like I can do the things that I need to do. There's a fine line between support and codependency.
Okay. So let me ask you, because I'm curious, how do you define codependency?
Needing to have the approval or support to be able to do everyday things. So lacking the confidence to be able to take on things on your own, and then having support as a secondary measure, which is the healthy thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's one thing if I'm like, hey, Robbie, let me bounce this off you. I want to get a different perspective, versus, hey, Robbie, I can't do this on my own. If you're not there, I can't do this. And I've found multiple scenarios in my life where I don't feel like I can do things without someone there to help get me through when something gets tough. And it started at a very young age for me. And in elementary school, learning to be a student, right? School was not easy for me. School was definitely a tough thing on multiple levels for me. Whether it was curriculum was just hard and I didn't know where to start, versus having growing up in a school that went basically, when I got there, was second grade through eighth grade, weren't going to school, basically the same 30 kids. And needing, when you are not in favor in the groups, you are not up. You're easily isolated from the group, from the class, and based on well, it's a little harder than I thought it was going to be. Based on things that happened to me in my childhood, made me very uneasy to be at school. And so I learned that I relied on my mom for help with homework, for help with social problems, those kinds of things. And then when my mom passed away, and when I was in 8th grade, I'd learned how to do all that stuff on my own. And that was hands down the hardest time of my life, of trying to figure out how do I navigate my learning and how I grow as a person, and separate what I need to do at home because of my home dynamic has now changed, and how do I manage school and everything else. So as I've gotten older, I have learned that if I am on an effective team, I can do anything. If I am paired up with the right people, if I am and that's not always the case. You're not always going to be on a strong team. You're not, as a leader, you have to be the one that steps up and creates the glue that holds that team together.
Mm-hmm.
And that I have found is sometimes hard for me to do when I'm not paired with the right people. And so basically how that impacted my development is it made me learn at a young age to be dependent on others to succeed. So in my business ventures I've done on my own, with friends, trying to start things off on my own, I will start out strong and then I will stop because I don't have support, or I don't feel like I have support.
So you've got the support.
That's easier said than said, though, right? When you've convinced yourself you can't,
I can see the barrier.
Yep, you don't see it. So when it comes to personal development, you end up stunting your own growth and you don't even realize it. So now that I've kind of covered a little bit of the introductory, do you see anything that I've said here in your own journey?
I think for me it's a little bit of the opposite.
I would agree with that.
Because you've worked with me, you've worked for me.
That's why I asked the question.
I struggle with relying on other people.
Mm-hmm.
I struggle with being on teams at times.
You and I are polar opposites when it comes to this concept.
I can go an entire day without needing to have someone working with me. Like I enjoy talking with people and sharing things and being able to vocalize stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But team projects are my crux. Team environments can be quite a struggle for me because, like I was talking to a friend of mine the other day, I rely on the ability to showcase my worth without having someone contributing or someone adding to, because then it's another hurdle, another obstacle, something else I have to calculate and dive into to predict. So it adds that obstacle that's hard for me to overcome at times.
I'm glad you said the word worth, right? So if you are dependent on others to find value in yourself and to find that validation that you're doing okay, you're not going very quickly. You're not going very far very quickly. But on the opposite side of that, if you are focused on, oh, this is my objective, this is how I'm going to get there, and you don't think about the others around you on your team, that can also be a detriment as well.
Mm-hmm.
As I think you've learned, I think we've had the conversation on the podcast when Jed was on here. That doesn't mean Jed's not going to be on here. This is just a side project.
Mm-hmm.
But Jed pointed out that you came in strong with an issue that we were having, and he pulled you aside afterwards and was like, "Whoa, this, you came across this way and it made me feel yada yada." And so that was I think a defining spot in your journey in leadership of like, hey, whoa, okay, I didn't realize I was being that way.
Mm-hmm.
And it made you take a step back and think, right, about how you're coming across. But I made the statement to my boss just a few days ago that I think I may have gotten into leadership for the wrong reasons. And he paused.
Why?
And was like, what?
Why do you... So you texted me this statement the other day, and I was in the middle of something at work. I don't remember what I was doing, but I held on to this. Why do you feel you got into leadership for the wrong reasons?
Because my thought was if I could get into leadership and I could be there for others and help improve others' lives in whatever way I could, remove obstacles, help somebody else see a perspective that they didn't see before, help them grow, then maybe I'll be worth enough.
Why is that the wrong reason to get into leadership? I want you to walk me down that bridge.
Because you cannot rely on others to create your self-worth. I am relying on others to paint a positive picture of myself that I don't already have.
I'm following, but at the same time, I'm not, because maybe my brain can't attach the two together, because I can see the Nick that I've worked with and that has worked for me and that is thriving. I don't see you relying on others to develop your own worth.
Because I don't show it. Unless I get overwhelmed, and then you see it.
Okay.
My team sees it. Both of my teams see it.
You've got more than one now. You've got two teams.
I had this scenario the other day where I was trying to do more than my bandwidth could handle. Tasks at work, with things that were going on with projects I was taking on, trying to get maintenance work or work orders pushed through, so that my team wasn't struggling because of something that was broken. And one of my team members stopped me and was like, you can't do everything, and that we're just happy that you're here. And I said, yeah, but if I don't do this, and I'm letting these things linger, then I'm failing you. They're like, you're not failing us. I'm like, but if I allow you to fail, then I am failing you. I'm failing the team. I'm not performing at a level that I should be at.
So you're putting a lot of extra weight on yourself to accomplish these things, to ensure that the barriers are gone for somebody else.
Yep.
So you're not doing it for you, you're doing it for somebody else.
Yep. Because if I can go in there and complete all those tasks and make sure that obstacles are removed from my team and that they have a good experience at work and they don't feel stressed out due to lingering things, then maybe I did enough. Maybe now I can look in the mirror and say, you know what, you're not so bad. But when you depend on other people so hard to have self-worth, it's a dangerous, and I didn't realize how dangerous it was, but it is a dangerous concept.
So you're seeking validation by accomplishing tasks and having someone tell you that they feel what you're doing for them.
And that's where accountability for my team comes very hard, because now if I hold somebody accountable, they might not approve of me anymore, and that will fall right in the narrative that I've already had for myself for 43 years. That will feed that narrative.
And we've had a conversation about this before, about the tough conversations of accountability. Mm-hmm. And I think we've even had one on the podcast about accountability.
We have.
And there's a saying that we've used multiple times, not even here on the podcast, but just in general in pair or in general conversation. If someone is being held accountable as in being written up or having some kind of disciplinary conversation, they should know it's coming, because they've put themselves in that spot. And you shouldn't feel negative about it, because it is their own actions that have put them there. but I can see
You're using logic.
I can see where the emotional side is taking over the logical side.
Emotions aren't logical.
No, they're not. I can tell you they're not. 100% they're not. They're the opposite side of the brain and this is where, like you had said, we're polar opposites. I lean more towards the logical side, and I lean far away from the emotional side. And I have to put a lot of effort to go back to the emotional piece at times.
So I try to apply logic to explain the emotion.
Mm-hmm.
And if you tie it back to childhood, we'll say childhood trauma for lack of a better term. If you tie it back to your childhood trauma, it's not logical. You don't. Your brain doesn't stop developing until you're 25 years old. So if you're trying to apply adult logic to a 12-year-old emotion, it doesn't work.
Nope.
It doesn't work, and so you spend so much you exhaust yourself trying to make sense of something that doesn't make sense, and you couldn't have stopped or handled or done any differently because you weren't equipped to at that age. And it comes back to having a safe environment in your home to be able to express what's going on. And I'll give you a small window into that. This is all stemming from a book I'm reading, by the way. And but one of the questions that's asked you is like, how do you view your parents?
Okay.
And the first thing out of my mouth is, my parents were great. My parents were fantastic people. But they made mistakes. Because there's no book for parenting. I mean, sure, there's parenting books, but there's no book for parenting.
There's parenting books and parenting classes and parenting lectures.
It doesn't matter.
No.
That doesn't matter. Every child is different. Every family is different. And my mom, I have a hard time with this because, she passed away. But my mom was a force to be reckoned with.
Why?
She was a very loud, very protective. I mean, she's the quintessential mama bear.
Okay. So don't mess with my cub or you're going to get the claws.
Like I felt more safe than I've ever felt being cuddled by my mother when I was a child. That was the safest spot I could be in because I knew nobody could hurt me if my mom was there.
Okay.
And but that also isn't healthy. I didn't learn to cope because, and then I got a crash course on learning how to cope, which didn't go well. My dad, bless his heart, he worked, sometimes 3 jobs so that my mom didn't have to work, so that she could stay home with my brother and I. And so my dad was very, very distant, and it is very hard for me to say that my dad wasn't really available because he's working. And when he was home, he was working. I mean, he built our house we lived in, like 1989 to, oh boy, till I was in high school. I didn't get closet doors until I was in high school. I mean, it's just, in 1989, we were living in my, in the shop that my dad built, and a camper and a camp trailer. We had one for the kitchen, one for, the shop was our living space, and then one was our sleeping quarters. And we were building, and my dad was building the house. And once it got to wintertime and it got too cold to be out there, we moved into the house before it was inspected. He got it to a point where where it could be inspected. We moved everything out of the house, all into the shop. Inspector came through, gave the approval, and moved everything back in that night.
Jiminy Christmas, all right.
So my dad is one of the hardest workers I've ever seen. Even at 79 years old, he still works most people that I know under the table. I mean, he is built that way. That's his coping, right? Like if you looking at it through adult eyes, if you work harder and you spend more hours working, then you have less time to be distracted on the things that are bothering you. You know, it's not until the last few years my dad's talked to me really about his military service or his father and how, you know, my grandfather was just distraught with PTSD before they knew what PTSD was. From all the shit that he saw in World War II. Sorry, we don't normally cuss on the podcast,
You're
but
fine.
you know what? That's what it was.
Uh-huh.
The shit that he saw in World War II and the stuff that he went to, being wounded, and the Philippines was not a good place. And that's where he served. And, you know, hearing stories about how, like, they're all at dinner when my dad and his brother and sister were all kids, you know, and you don't want to knock over the salt shaker or something because his dad's going to flip. And so his dad worked his ass off and drank to hide from his demons, you know. And my dad doesn't barely drinks. He limits himself to, if he has a beer, it's one beer. He refuses to have any more than that. And but it was very hard for me to admit that my dad wasn't really there because he was gone all the time. He was working, even at home. Even when he was home, he really wasn't there. And so that was for somebody that I admired so much for the sacrifices that he made to make sure our family never went wanting. It's very hard for me to say that there was a mistake there. And I don't even know now, saying it out loud, I don't even know if it was a mistake. It was just it was what it was.
Mm-hmm.
You know, even now, I watch my dad. And he works. He works and he works and he works.
It's the routine. It's the habit. It's built into him to do this.
Yep. And I've put self-worth into, well, he at the age that I am now, what was he doing at that time? Oh, he had 3 houses and he was doing this. And well, look at my life. I'm not in the same spot. And so I compare myself to that. Because I need his approval. Because I never learned to just like myself.
Well, there's a saying for that. Comparison is the thief of joy.
Sure.
And logically means one thing. Emotionally means something completely different.
Sure. So all that being said, you know, I spent 20 years at the same company, over 20 years at the same company, trying to better myself, trying to do better for my family. And the whole time, I never ever could look at myself in the mirror and say, yeah, you're doing good. There's not been a point in my life where I've been able to say that. And that sucks.
That hurts hearing that.
That sucks.
Really hurts hearing that.
I put everything that I have into other people and don't leave anything for myself. And that's why I say I may have gotten into leadership for the wrong reasons. Because if I spend all the energy that I have at work, what do I have left for my wife? What do I have left for my daughter? What do I have left for me? Mm-hmm. I'm still putting other people in front of me just by saying the way I said it.
Mm-hmm.
I need my wife to be okay so I can be okay.
Checking the boxes to make sure that everyone else is okay, and you're putting yourself at the bottom, and then you're giving yourself no room for energy and no room for anything.
And that caveat is, then I don't ask for help when I need it.
Because you don't feel like you can.
I don't feel like I deserve it.
So real quick, this book that he's talking about is called Love is a Choice Workbook, Letting Go of Unhealthy Relationships, written by Dr. Hemfeld, Minerth, Meyer, Newman, Deborah, and Brian. So,
is there a way we can put a link to that?
Yeah, I'll put a link to it in the bottom of the podcast for everybody. So, I have some similarities to a lot of that, but there's like we had covered earlier, I have opposite experiences because I don't feel like I need other people's validation for the most part in some aspects. And getting into leadership, I wanted it, like we've covered, remember what episode it was, where I did it to check a box to gain leadership, to become a producer, to be a filmmaker.
Yeah, but let me stop you right there. In your friend group growing up, were you an outcast, or did you have a tight net friend group?
Oh, I had a massive tight knit friend group.
See, I had a friend group, but tight is not the word I would use.
Okay.
So I had a subsection of classmates that were extremely manipulative.
Okay.
I had a subsection of the popular kids, because there's a couple kids that their family had money, and everybody wanted to be their friend because
you got stuff out of it.
Well, yeah, because like I'm sure Dennis will never hear this podcast, but my friend Dennis, growing up, his parents owned a restaurant in Albany, and called the Hereford Steer, and in its heyday, it was very successful, and so they had a really big, nice house. They had the big screen TV. They had the satellite dish that looked like it should be used for NASA, that you actually had to put in coordinates and it would move.
Oh, that's cool. That's cool. Okay.
They had the jacuzzi, the pool, the whole 9 yards, right? They had all the cool stuff that all of us kids, on the weekend, that's where we wanted to go hang out, because we could get, they'd always get us pizza. They'd always get us, it was the fun place to be, right? And if you were alienated from that group because X, Y, and Z reasons, then you are literally the outcast. And I found myself in that position way more than I wanted to admit. And it was because I was a very emotional kid, because things were happening to me that nobody knew about. And still basically nobody knows about it. I barely told my wife. I mean, that's how deep-seated some of this stuff is. And it's a lot for me to even put myself out here to talk about it, to be honest with you.
You are what we would call a bottler. You hang on to it till the bottle breaks. And then you let it all out, then you get another bottle. You do it all over.
Well, because I didn't have a choice. Because I knew if my mom got involved, how I've described my mother, being the quintessential mama bear,
mm-hmm.
then everybody's going to know. Because she's going to go scorched earth. And she's going to find out who hurt her child, and she is going to make them regret
hurting her child.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
And so I was definitely afraid of that. So I spent a lot of time in my bedroom, and I would pile up clothes and blankets, and I'd have my G.I. Joes and my Ninja Turtles and stuff, and I'd make like little caves and stuff. And that was my safe spot, because nobody could get me there, because my mom was patrolling the house, right? Or at least that's what the picture in my head was. She's there protecting me,
mm-hmm.
so nobody can get me.
And your safe space, your imaginative playground, is where you can do whatever and control that situation.
Yep. And so now, as an adult, it's very hard for me to hold people accountable because I need their approval. And I didn't realize that was the thing until I started reading this book. I need their approval. Because that's what's gonna make me okay to do my job. That's gonna make me okay to be able to get out of bed tomorrow and go back and do it again. And the times that I've had people come down on me on the team, our hourly team leaders and stuff, and I've been in some pretty, well, you know them.
Mm-hmm. Rough situations.
Some rough conversations. In those moments, I knew they were right. Doesn't even matter what they were saying. I knew that they saw right through my mask. They saw right through my facade. And they saw who I really was. An insecure, unable to do anything person. And then I turned right back into that little hurt kid and not be able to function in that situation. Or lash out, or just never want to come back. And I did that at other jobs. My first go at leadership lasted 2.5 weeks because I couldn't cope and handle, because I knew that CEO of that company saw right through me. And it was like I was about to be murdered. And I had to get away from it as fast as I could to survive. Because if I stayed there, I would die. It's that level of panic got me out of that situation.
That's brutal. That is brutal.
And that person, apparently, according to very good sources, speaks very highly of me and barely knows me.
So you had this perception that they saw right through you, but the reality was that everyone else saw was not that.
Correct.
So how is this book helping you?
It's helping me realize my perception of the world so that I can start recognizing where that comes from and healing from it. Because now, as an adult, I can apply logic and start healing from those situations. But that's going to take a long time. A very long time.
So do you feel like your initial reaction when you're looking back at some of these things is a lot more emotional than it should be in some instances, and you have to find a way to dial that back just a little bit so you're not so hard on yourself?
I need to recognize that there's nothing I could have done differently in those situations. I did the best I could with what I had. My parents were doing the best they could with what they had.
I would agree with that.
And that I need to learn to let it lie where it lies.
So let me ask you another question. Do you think that having someone's favor and having someone's trust is the same thing or a different thing?
That's a good question. I don't know. I don't think I can answer that right now.
And the reason I ask that is we've talked a lot about having people's trust, and being a leader. One of the core foundations is building that trust with your team, so that you're putting capital in the bank. They will do anything you ask because they've got that trust in you.
Yep.
Having the favor of somebody, like being liked or being the popular kid or being the go-to resource. In my opinion, having someone's favor or having someone's approval of you isn't as strong as their trust. Because you can be the most liked leader in the building, but if they don't trust your decision making, if they don't trust you as a person, they may like you, but they're not going to do what you're asking them to do.
Yeah, and most of the time in leadership, it's not about whether somebody likes you or not.
So let's.
And like I said, I didn't know I was doing that. Didn't even realize I was doing that.
So let's go back to my question. Do you think there's a difference between having someone's favor and having someone's trust?
Logically speaking, yes.
Okay.
But again, it's not logical.
Nope. It's an emotional question.
So, and as I've kind of worked through some of this stuff, it's less about how it is less about how kids treated me or the things that I went through, and more about the fact that I wasn't able to articulate what was going on in my life to my parents so they could help me learn how to cope with that situation. And that's the skill I didn't develop.
Because your dad was super busy. He's still super busy today. And your mom was your safe place.
No. And I was in some way scared of her.
I mean, yeah, you wouldn't want the bear unleashed every time something small.
That's why in nature you don't go walk up to a bear cub, because if mama bear sees it, you're dead.
Did I tell you about the time that I was in Colorado and I was hiking on the trail in the Rocky Mountain National Park?
No.
So, fun little tangent for a second. During the height of COVID, I decided to go on a plane to Denver, Colorado during the middle of July, or at the beginning of July, on the 4th of July. And I went to the Rocky Mountain National Park. It's a park I've always wanted to go to see the mountains, see the wildlife, to go on a hike, and just enjoy it, because I'm a huge fan.
We weren't working at the same company yet.
We were working at Target, and I hadn't met you yet because I was in the fulfillment center and you were working in the warehouse. I had yet to become...
said the company name.
Oh, my bad.
Oops.
I'll take that out.
Nah, leave it in.
I hadn't become your boss yet because I was in your department, but I was not in the same building.
Yeah, because in 2020 I was still in AP and doing logistics.
And you hadn't moved over yet.
Correct.
Yeah. So On this trip, I learned a lot about myself. I landed at midnight on my birthday in Denver. I forgot that COVID changed everything. There was no more nightlife. Hotels didn't check it at any time of day. Rental car places stopped at certain hours. Restaurants, bars, everything closed at certain times of day. So I'm by myself.
6 feet apart. 6 feet apart.
Yeah, I know, right?
COVID.
So I landed at Denver at midnight. I had to get an Uber from downtown Denver to Greenwood to go try to get to my hotel. Realized that it's all closed. I had a duffel bag, a briefcase, a camera bag, and a laptop bag all attached to me. This 30-year-old walking around Denver trying to figure out how I'm going to get everything going. I finally, 7 hours later, got back to downtown Denver, got my rental car, took a nap in my rental car, and then I checked into my hotel on my birthday. So I've done all this walking, all these miles that one night. I get to the park the next day.
Oh, you're lucky you didn't get mugged.
Yeah, I know, right? I don't know how I survived that, because I walked past I don't know how many countless homeless and everyone and shady people through all of downtown Denver. But when I get to the park on that Friday, I pull up. I had paid my pass, or what I thought was the correct pass to get into the park. They started charging two different fees. One was a state entry park fee. The other was a timed entry fee. You had to pay ahead of time to be able to get into the park between the hours of 8 a.m. and 5 p.m., the peak travel time, as they call it. They were the first park in all of America to do this. So I had to turn around at the entrance, and I ended up going to a trailhead at the bottom of the park, and I hiked in 7 miles uphill, 92-degree weather, 8,500 feet of elevation.
Uphill. With snow, barefooted, both ways.
When I was your age, I had to hike both ways up the snow and uphill just to get to school.
Barefooted.
Yeah, barefooted. I walked by equestrian group that was on horseback on a 10-mile horse ride. I saw a bunch of different bald eagles, bears, you name it, on this hike to this lake. I finally get there. I'm at Lake Stevens in Rocket Mountain National Park. And I just taking in the view, I sit there for like an hour just because that was incredible heat, huge elevation. My water bottle was empty. Needed to find water so I could recuperate, but I just see this beautiful landscape in front of me. I finally walked to the other side of the lake, get water, talk to a couple locals, take some pictures of wildlife. This guy walks past me and says, "Hey, have you seen a moose walking around here?" "No, not yet at least. I'm hoping to at some point." I walk all the way back around this lake, which takes me 10 minutes to get around this lake because it's that big. Turn around, there's a moose standing in the middle of the lake at the spot where I had just walked from. I pick back up my camera bag, pick back up my wildlife lens, and I walk all the way across the lake. It's not only a moose, it's a full-grown moose with her calf that is standing in this lake. And they are probably 40 feet from me.
That's a bad place to be.
As I'm taking these pictures, the only thought that was crossing my mind is, where is the moose? Where is the bull? Because I don't want to get charged right now by a...
You're probably in more danger from the mom than you were from the bull.
Probably. But I was very thankful that she didn't care that we were there.
Yeah.
She was ignoring us because I kept my distance.
Good.
Because if you've seen a moose, they are not exactly small.
No. They're very large animals.
Uh-huh. And this lake was probably 10 feet deep, and she was fully above the water.
Yeah, she could have gained that ground and closed the gap between you two very quickly.
But she was keeping her calf on the other side of her, apart from this group of, I think there was like 10 of us that were taking pictures of it. And I'm the only one with a professional camera taking pictures at this time.
Yeah.
Everyone is using their phones, and I've got this big Nikon camera with me, taking all these shots. And that's the only thought. Like, you talk about Mama Bear and the calf. I'm thinking Mama Bear and the bull protecting that young calf so that no one could get near them. Probably the most cool but terrifying experience I've ever been on a hike before. Long roundabout tangent to get to that portion of the story. But yeah, it's I don't even know where I was going with that story, but it's just having that ability to experience the fear of mama bear, but also what she's protecting and why she's protecting it.
Yeah, but that's having that experience as an adult is different than having that same exact experience as a child.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I guarantee if you were a child, there'd be some fear there. You know, because knowing my parents, if we were in that situation, they would have told me all the things to be aware of. And so there would have been already a certain level set of fear going into that situation, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I would have had a healthy respect for that animal and been terrified of it.
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't have been able to walk over and appreciate the beauty that you were seeing as a child. I wouldn't have been able to. No way.
No, but as I'm an adult, I'm taking all these pictures and I'm trying to process everything on my checklist I know from my experience as a wildlife photographer, the things that I need to be aware of that I see on YouTube videos or people talk about all the time, or I read on blogs of like what not to do, what to be aware of, and how to keep yourself safe. Sure, there was a big group of people, but a bull charging is going to scatter that group. So how do you prevent the charge? How do you prevent all those instances? So just checking those boxes.
Yep. And as a kid, you think, if I want to avoid all that, then you don't do it. You don't provoke it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if I would have provoked my mom, everybody would have known what I was going through that I didn't want people to know about. And, you know, at the end of the day, it probably would have been a good thing. But I couldn't see that. All I knew was fear. You know? And so that kind of experience, that kind of life experience, and not learning how to cope with those things very much affects you as an adult. And you don't realize it. And that's the idea of the book, is to identify those things and learn coping strategies, learn how to heal from those things, learn to let it go, learn to let it apply logic to it as an adult, and reassure your psyche, your small child that's still in there, that everything's okay, that you couldn't have done anything different.
So for all of our Frozen fans, all of our Disney fans, just remember the song "Let It Go." It's a great way to.
Oh, that's a terrible song.
It's a good way to move past things, though. Of like, don't let what's happening now impact you for the rest of your life. But it's difficult for some people to let things go if that's what you're used to doing, is hanging on to stuff.
Nope.
Because it's your innate nature.
Yep. And so in leadership, there is as we've talked about in prior episodes, in the main podcast, you know, you have a fine line to walk. You know, you want to build trust with your team and build good relationships and have those relationships be the foundation of a strong, productive team. But at the same token, it is your job to hold them accountable when things are not going, when they're not making the decisions that they should be making to be successful.
Mm-hmm.
And having those difficult conversations, especially with somebody that is a very strong personality and has a lot of opinions, and, you know, they have their way of looking at the world, and that's the only way they see it.
Mm-hmm.
So having that conversation, knowing it's a losing battle, or at least giving yourself the impression that it's a losing battle, it makes it extremely difficult, because I know that this is an alpha, right? I hate talking about people alpha and beta and all that kind of shit, but because some of it is preposterous to me, because at the end of the day, we all have, you know, whether it's at work or at home, we all have a job to do, right? Whether you're a parent, whether you're a supervisor, whether you're part of you're the cog in the massive set of gears that is your team.
Mm-hmm.
You have to be able to have those difficult conversations, even if it's one-on-one with a peer, and say, you know what, this isn't okay. How you're talking to me isn't okay, or how we're looking at this is the wrong way. And here, let me give you my insight so that we can find common ground, yada, yada. Having those conversations, you know, for me, it's either I shy away from it, or I am way too aggressive with it. And if it's a peer that I don't respect, it's 10 times more aggressive. Even if I do have a level of respect and I want them to do better, it's still aggressive.
Mm-hmm.
If I've built that foundation of a good relationship with that person and they're screwing up, then it's going to be aggressive. And that's not okay.
No.
I still have to show a level of respect to my peers that whether they've earned it or not, it's the right thing to do. And I don't do well with that fine line. But even going back to my days we've said it at Target when I was lead, I worked very hard to be a soft-spoken, how do I word this? Soft-spoken and attentive, I guess, to the people that I was trying to help be successful. And I'd give them I'd try to utilize the sandwich of too good, a good compliment, then a little tough with another good compliment, to try to soften the blow,
Mm-hmm.
which works to a certain extent. It definitely works with people that are receptive to it,
Mm-hmm.
and that are willing to work with you. It's not as effective with people that think you're full of it.
Yeah.
If they already don't have a good opinion of you, I would take that home with me. Well, what can I do different to make this person be more receptive to me? And sometimes it's not about that. Sometimes you have to let them sit in their filth,
Mm-hmm.
because they've got to come to terms with that they're not making the right decisions and that you're trying to help them. And sometimes that's not an easy thing to hear.
Sometimes the hardest thing to remember is that not everyone is going to approve or be receptive of their leader or the things that they have put them, the situation they put themselves in, that now they have the repercussions, the consequences for, and they don't want to hear it. They don't want to accept it. They want to dodge it. And it's those people that take the most advantage of the kind and caring leaders, because they find ways to push back, to put doubt back into that leader, which is not healthy for that leader.
No, it's not. But as a leader, you have to learn to filter through that,
Mm-hmm.
and that you're not gonna please everybody. You could have a team of 40 people, and you might have good relationships with 25 of them, but the rest of them, sometimes it is what it is. And at the end of the day, you just hold them accountable, and if they're not willing to get on board and they're not willing to fall within the company guidelines of doing productive work or being a part of the team, then they work themselves out.
Yep.
And that is extremely hard for me.
Well, it's hard to see this person you've spent all this time and all these resources on now no longer be on your team. It feels like you failed them. It feels like you failed your team. It feels like you've failed as a leader or a person because you couldn't get that individual on to common ground with you, which is not fair to you to feel like you failed.
Well, it's not fair to put it all on yourself.
Nope.
Like there's, that's part of like the extreme ownership thing, the idea of extreme ownership. And, that was the first book that I really, really, really latched onto and felt like this is gold. This is how I should live my life. I need to take ownership of everything that is in my control, right? And in my circle, I have to own it. Which, yeah, you do, right? You have to take ownership. But the whole point of the dichotomy of leadership is to teach you that there's a balance, right? You can't just go full extreme ownership. The idea of extreme ownership, you can't just apply that in everything because you don't own everything.
Nope.
And understanding where that line is, for me, is extremely blurred. And the idea of letting someone fail and letting that hurt my team so that I'm not carrying the weight that someone else is leaving so that they can be held accountable for their actions. In my mind, I'm letting my team down. And it's taken my team to tell me it's okay, you don't need to do that. yes, it's a struggle for us, but that's not on you. That this piece of the puzzle isn't yours to own.
And that shows that they care about you.
It does, absolutely, but it also is a very hard pill for me to swallow because I don't want to do it. I don't want to let somebody else flounder because someone else didn't do their job.
Mm-hmm.
You know, whether it's an hourly team member, another salary team member. If I could get on a piece of equipment at my job where, you know, that's union work and I can't do that because of a collective bargaining agreement, I wish I sit there and stew on the fact that I can't help them. Like, we're short staffed. We had 3 call-ins and, you know, we've got people covering multiple positions. And if I could just get on a lift, I could help out and relieve some of that burden from these 2 people. I can't do that. It's not in the cards for me.
Nope.
Even at my former place of employment, you know, early in my time there, we called them group leaders at the time, but group leaders in emergency situations could hop on equipment if they were trained.
Mm-hmm.
Not anymore.
Nope.
You go through, like, you know this, but you go through a process with team members and you learn different functions from a trainer on the floor, and you might get permitted to have a basic understanding of how that equipment operates so that when you do a standard work audit, that you can give pointers on how to do a more efficient job with that function.
Mm-hmm.
But you're not certified to do that job.
Nope.
So, you're not certified to run that piece of equipment by yourself. And I'm a doer, right? Like, I want to be that leader that is picking up the rope and pulling along with the team. And in my mind, that translates into doing the work. And in my environment now, I can't do that. And that is
hard.
A major sticking point for me.
Well, I mean, like you've said, you've gone from being a worker for decades to being a leader, and then now you're a full-blown executive leader where you are off the floor physically. You can't do the job, so the adjustment period is the opposite of what I experienced. I went from being a leader for a little over a decade to now I'm doing.
Yeah.
And that's the trial by fire for me, is how do I go back into a mode that I've not been in for 11 years.
Yeah. So, kind of as we've kind of talked about this, have you been able to think about, you know, your upbringing, maybe your early time in leadership, or as you're working into leadership positions where you felt dependent on others to be successful?
This is going to be pretty brutal to say, but I feel like people were in my way.
Okay.
I was always waiting for someone else to not be in that spot so I could take that spot. Or I was waiting for somebody else to be doing something different so I could do what they were doing. So I could move up the chain, or I could learn something new, because I've always felt tied down to what I'm currently doing, and I want to do something else, but I have to wait for that next person to do something else so I can do something else. So I've been in the rotation, as I would call it, of learning and doing. Like when I was in school, group projects, like I said, were my crux. I hated them. Why? I had to rely on someone else to take on a burden of work that didn't go well almost all the time. So I started doing group projects as single projects in every class I was in. Not until college did I actually have to work with other people, because filmmaking, you're not by yourself. You can for certain things, but have you ever seen the size of a team that makes a movie?
I mean, no, but I know it's very intricate. You know, you just watch the credits of a major movie, and that the list of names, it feels like never stops.
Uh-huh. It's because there's 10 people minimum on the costume team. There's 10 people on the concept team minimum. There's 20 people behind the camera doing lights, sound, camera controls, audio controls. If there's 2 cameras, you're adding a bunch more people to that. There's the director, there's the producer, there's the cast. You can't do it all by yourself. And I had a pretty hard crash course in that. But when I was in game design school, I could write the stories. I could program the levels. I could do some basic art. I could do a lot of stuff by myself. So I have struggled with group projects since I was in middle school. And being a leader is like being in a group project. You have the subject matter experts.
It's like being in a group project, but you are still isolated and by yourself.
Mm-hmm.
It is leadership can be the most lonely spot in the organization. And it doesn't seem like it, especially when you're on the other side or you haven't been in a leadership position before. You are very much isolated.
The only time a leader gets to themselves is if they remember to take their lunch.
3 worlds.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It is supposed to be your quiet time, but I remember being that leader that my lunch break was at 8 hours into my day and I worked 12-hour days. My hourly team members got their lunch at their exact lunch period. I got mine whenever I had time. Or I was in the middle of a meeting and I'm eating lunch as a meeting. So I'm not even actually having personal time. So my days are very fast, very busy, very exhausting the entire way just because of everything that's going on. And it does feel isolating because you have all these things going on at one time. Some you're in control of. A lot of it you're not.
Yeah. I guess if any of this resonates with you, anybody listening, I highly encourage you to take a step back and try to understand some of the whys of why you would do that, why you need your boss's approval so much, why you need your coworkers' approval so much, why you need your team's approval so much. If you're in that position, really analyze it. Sit down and start asking yourself some questions. And, if you're not into reading books or whatever, and you're not, I've found that I haven't gotten very far through this book, I'll admit it, because it's difficult. It's difficult to have realizations that my parents weren't perfect. Oh, no.
No one's perfect, Nick.
My parents were not perfect. And that is not an easy thing for me to say, because I hold my parents in very high regard. Even my stepmom, who's a fantastic person, right? Incredibly intelligent, very much, in a lot of ways, a lot like my mom. They were both teachers. They were in different fields, but they were both in teaching. My mom, she worked for CSD and did homeschool teaching, and a homeschool assessment, assessing kids where they're at, whether they're behind or ahead or whatever. And my stepmom was a autism specialist, so she's extremely well versed in special education. She also taught home ec. But I look at people's accomplishments and I'm like, whoa, I can never measure up. And that's part of it again. Mm-hmm. You've got you're constantly comparing yourself under a microscope to other people, where you're at, where, my department head right now, him and I are the same exact age. We graduated the same year. He's made companies and, done all these high level achievements, and I'm a coach. So I can't help but be like, wow, what have I done with my life? Our journeys are different. Mm-hmm. He made different decisions. He's got a higher education that I don't have. He spent time in the military. I didn't. There's so many things that we did differently that led us to where we're at now. I didn't do those things. So why would I put that on myself? I'm learning how I'm learning, and I did things differently, and there's nothing wrong with that.
Nope. Nothing wrong at all.
But it's in the back of my head all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And it is, what did you say? What's the thief of joy comparison?
The biggest thief comparison is the biggest thief of joy. Because when you start comparing yourself to others, you start having doubt, start losing confidence, and you're taking all of your accomplishments and saying, they didn't matter. I'm not there. I'm not where that person is.
Yep.
Don't do that. Please, if you're listening to this, please don't do that.
So this is a little bit of a different episode than we've had on the show. That's why we're naming this series Cliff Notes, just kind of sidebars, right, if you will, and things that influenced us in I'd like to focus on the things that have influenced us. There's the words. And shaped us into the people that we are, and kind of why we are where we are. And I think it's really important to not forget where you came from, but try and take what you can learn, so that you're not dwelling on your past, but you've learned some lessons from it, and you know what not to do.
Yeah. Well, it's like I was having a conversation with somebody 2 weeks ago. I don't remember what we were talking about, but they were telling me they were always focused on the past, and then they couldn't see what was in front of them. And I told them, well, just imagine your life is like you're driving a car. You have to look forward. You're going to run into something, but the rear view mirror that's behind you, you can take a glance every now and then to see what you've left behind, but that's where it's behind you. You can learn from it, but don't let it consume you, or you're going to hit something.
Yeah. So again, I mean, there's lots of ways to if this resonates with you, and there's a lot of options out there this day and age. Whether it's counseling, whether it's books, whether it's never ever think that you're weak because you need to learn something and you need a little help. And that might be from a book, it might be from a counselor, it might be from sitting down with a buddy and talking through a few things, in a place that you feel comfortable, letting some of these things out. I think it's a huge step for me to be able to even talk about this stuff and put it out there for people to listen to, because one person, 30 people might listen to this, or 300 people, or 300,000. But if one person takes away from this conversation and goes, you know what, that sounds like me, and starts diving into their own muddy pit of sadness, and learns something and heals from it, then it's worth it.
Mm-hmm.
It's worth helping somebody make that step to heal from their past. And if my dad ever hears this, nothing I've said here is a knock against you. I was a very fortunate child in a lot of ways, but nobody's perfect.
Nope.
And I wish, looking back on it, I had the courage to tell my dad what was going on, because maybe our relationship, or maybe our relationship growing up would have been different. Maybe my dad would have been like, you know what, this can wait. I need to be there for my son. But he didn't know something was going on, so he did. In his mind, everything's fine.
It's the what ifs. It's the how could this be. It's the maybe my life would have done differently. It's we can ask those questions all we want all day long, or theorize what could have happened. But in every situation, there's a right or a left choice. You went one way, and the life followed you that way.
So, anyway, we're past the hour mark here, so
that's all right.
We'll wrap it up.
So everybody, please, if you enjoyed this, leave some comments below. Please continue to share our podcast so the word gets out, and we're going to continue doing more of these Cliff Note episodes. I've got an idea for one that I'm going to get written up so we can talk about it on our next episode.
Also, if somebody out there wants to hear more about this, or wants to deep dive on this topic even more, throw some comments in there, and we'll do another episode on it.
Yeah, there's more room for conversation than this for sure, and I'm pretty sure we're going to come back to it.
Yep.
So everybody, thank you for tuning in here on the Leadership Journal with your hosts Nick and Robbie, and we'll catch you on our next week's episode. Thank you guys.
Thank you.